Hello and welcome to the Today's Homeowner Weekly Podcast. We're here to help you with the challenges we all face as homeowners. I'm Danny Lifford.
And I'm Joe Truini. And each week, Danny and I are here on the podcast to answer any and all home improvement questions.
And we want to hear from you. Send us your questions or comments at todayshomeowner.com/podcast.
Okay, Danny, let's get started.
Today's Homeowner Podcast is brought to you by the Home Depot. How doers get more done. This week, we tackle a question about moss. What makes moss grow on almost anything, on horizontal surface, vertical surfaces, but especially on a porous surface like pavers? We give a few tips on how to eliminate that moss without a whole lot of back-breaking work.
Yeah, because that moss is pretty strong. It doesn't look like much, but they have deep roots and they really grip onto almost any surface. So sometimes removing it can be a problem, especially if it's always in the shade, right? Because that's where moss typically grows. And we're also going to talk to a homeowner who has some beautiful maple hardwood trim that has a natural finish on it. But the problem is when someone painted the room, they got paint all over the trim. And she wants to know, how can she remove the paint without damaging the natural finish of the wood? So we're going to share a couple of tips for that problem coming up.
Another thing, if you have gutters around your house, you get so tired of cleaning those gutters. And, everywhere you look, there's different ways of keeping leaves and debris out of your gutters. But which ones really work and what is really the best way to approach that? We have a homeowner that's very frustrated and even mentioned that part of their house is 30 feet off the ground and they're a little tired of cleaning their gutters and it's getting expensive for someone else to do. We explore a few of the options that'll keep you off that ladder.
Well, if you have 30-foot gutters, you just have to plant 28-foot trees, and then it won't be an issue.
There you go. Reach out. There you go.
I didn't think to tell him that.
Oh, boy.
And I'm going to share a simple solution on how, if you need to paint windows, you know how difficult it is to mask off all the glass before you paint. Well, I have a simple solution that can tell you how to paint the window without using any masking tape at all.
Also, if you have some French doors that need a little attention, this tip will also help you with that. Hey, we've got this and a whole lot more, so let's get started. Joe, what else has been going on around your house? You and I get an opportunity to hear about all kinds of things. I try to read all of the press releases I get on different things. I know you get bombarded with them as well.
Yeah, you were talking about emails, and we get so many emails about bath vent fans, how to properly vent the bathroom, mold and mildew issues in rooms, which are often in bathrooms as well. Well, I heard from our friends over at Brown Newtone, and they have a brand new bath vent fan. It's called Surface Shield. I don't know if you're familiar with this. I've never heard of it. And it's first of all, it's a really slick looking. If you go to Brown Newtone /Surface Shield, you can find some more information on this. But it's really cool looking. But it has it works like any other really high volume bath van, 110 CFM. But it has this light in it. It's like a violet hue, they call it. It's like a purplish light down the middle of this fan. And you leave that on, and apparently that light prevents the growth of mold, bacteria, and fungus in the room. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how that works. Maybe we should get someone on air with us, get the product manager, because it just sounds really cool. And so what you do is when you're not using the room, you just flip the switch, and it turns on this purplish light, very light purple light. And it only costs like $4 a year to run it, the additional electricity to run this light. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting considering how many emails and calls we get about mold and mildew in bathrooms.
Sure.
What do you do about
Surface Shield from Brown Newtone. Joe, I actually saw the very first one over a year ago that they were in development. It was the first little prototype that they brought out, and they explained to me how it works.
Okay.
I'm going to have to revisit that because it was pretty scientific, but just ingenious. But the thing about Brown Newtone, they will not bring a product out in the market. They won't rush it out there and hope it works. They test it and test it and test it. So we'll talk more about that. Another great solution to an inevitable problem around the home with mold, mildew. We talk about it almost each and every week. Let's work an email in here. This one's from Joshua. Let's see. Condensation builds up on my AC vents in my ceiling. It is wicking into the ceiling and leaves stains and some type of mold or mildew. Is there a way to prevent this condensation? Can I remedy and prevent this myself? I don't think reducing the humidity in my home is a realistic option as we live in a very humid area. It's a 2.5-year-old well-insulated house. Thanks for your help. Well, I'll tell you, Joshua, I had the exact same thing on a house recently, and, it's all it was is a little bit of the insulation in the attic that was wrapping the actual outlet in the where that goes through the ceiling, and it had just a small tear in it. And what happens is when that cold air is being delivered into that register and you have the heat of the attic, it immediately condensates there. So all I had to do is I just took it and kind of retucked it around that part of the ductwork. Then I took some metal, some foil duct tape, and wrapped it real thoroughly around there. Then tucked the insulation tightly back around it. It stopped immediately. Then just a little bit of bleach and water sprayed on the mold and mildew spot. And then I dabbed it with a paper towel, then just real slowly so that I didn't damage anything. Within 5 minutes, the problem was solved, and I hadn't had any worry on it whatsoever. So get in that attic and see if that's what's happening, because even if insulation is packed around it, it's not enough to keep that condensation from happening. So that one might be an easy one for you to take care of yourself. Time for our best new product segment, brought to you by the Home Depot. How doers get more done. Battery-powered chainsaws have been around for years, but the most common problem people had with them is that they just seem underpowered for just about anything that you're doing other than just little small jobs. But Milwaukee is out to change that impression with their M18 Fuel 16-inch chainsaw. It uses a brushless mower and their M18 red lithium batteries to maintain speed under heavy loads without bogging down, so it can outperform small gas engines and even higher voltage systems. That means you have the power to cut hardwoods faster than gas with up to 150 cuts per charge. Heck, after that long, you're tired yourself. It lasts longer than you do, probably.
Yeah, your wife will get tired and want to come in at that point.
Oh, no. You can't have your wife cutting wood out there, Joe. In fact, they designed this saw to meet the performance and durability needs of professional landscape and utility company pros. RedLink Plus intelligence ensures maximum performance and protects the tool from overload, overheating, and other discharge. And since it reaches full throttle in under 1 second, it allows you to ultimately control and have that productivity that you want. For more information on this Milwaukee cordless chainsaw, check it out at homedepot.com. We also get some great recorded calls. We're going to start that off with a call from Iowa.
My question is about black mold that may have leaked in around the ceiling from an overflow from an eave spout or in bathrooms. And I don't know, I would like to know the proper way to take care of it safely and dispose of it.
Okay, well, it's certainly something that you need to be aware of. I would, first thing I would do is when you're near it, near that area that's affected, go ahead and put a mask on. Some gloves are also recommended. And here's a real simple formula. If you use 1 part baking soda, 5 parts white vinegar, and 5 parts water, and just put it in a spray bottle and just shake it up a little bit, and then just saturate the area that you're seeing the black mold. Then take a sponge and just real carefully just scrub off as much as you possibly can. Using hot water. Allow it to dry and see how it looks. If you need to do it again, spray it again, wipe it off again. That will safely remove it from the surface. It'll also penetrate a little bit there to help to keep it from coming back. That's all assuming that you've taken care of the water source. But that should be a good, safe way of doing it. But do use a safe way of going about removing it. Again, the mask is a good idea, and gloves as well. Let's get another one here. Another call from William.
Yes, I'm trying to remodel an old house, and one of the bathrooms, it had wallpaper, so I began tearing the wallpaper off. And as I was tearing the old wallpaper off, it tore the paper backing off behind it, and there's actually plywood walls in there. And with a thin, 16th of an inch sheet of paper, some kind of cardboard paper on it or something. Anyway, I've got gaps now where the paper tore off and just plywood. So I'm wondering, is there a way to spackle the plywood? I know probably can't use regular spackle, but is there some type of putty or something that I can smooth out the roughness on the wall now and the places where the paper tore off the plywood so that I can paint it and make it look good?
All right, William, that's very interesting. You removed wallpaper and found plywood. I'm not sure I've seen that before, but the good news is the plywood's pretty durable, much more durable than drywall would be. So you have a couple of options. I mean, you could go over it with drywall and just refinish finish the drywall with tape and compound, and you have a nice, clean, perfectly new surface to start with, and you could prime it and paint it. As far as the plywood, you'd have to sand it down and get everything off and get to the wood and get it as smooth as possible. Any joints or voids or knot holes or anything like that, you could fill with a wood putty and smooth it out and, sand it smooth and then prime it and paint it. My concern would be, you'd have to use a really high quality primer and a high quality paint to hide the texture, the wood grain, and the patching of the plywood. That would be the only reason I'd suggest maybe going over it with 1/4-inch sheetrock. And again, so you'd have really a brand new surface to work with. So those are your two options. Okay, let's go to Michigan and talk to Charles.
My problem is we're having a home built, and one corner of the slab of the house was poured wrong, and they went back and did 2 more pours to attempt to straighten it out, but now the wall is below the grade of the concrete. I was wondering if when they brick it in, will that be fine, especially if I use a Thompson's water seal or something sprayed on the outside of the brick to seal everything. Would that be okay?
Well, Charles, I'm a little worried about this.
I am too.
When that slab is the most important part of that house, and if they've come back and put secondary pours, especially small pours like that, if they didn't do it really, really good with pinning it together and combining the, I think you got a big problem here. I hate to say it, and I would suggest getting a structural engineer out there immediately and letting them tell you exactly what needs to be done. Because if that wall is sitting below and you've got a slab up above it, how are you going to attach your drywall on the inside? How are you going to attach your sheathing on the outside? Potential water problems. I have to think that it's not level and it's not plumb. I would stop the progress of the house right now and have a structural engineer take a look at it. Living there in Michigan, you have some extreme temperatures that you're dealing with. I'm afraid that doesn't sound very good, and that's a tremendous mistake on someone's part there by not pouring that slab right. Don't try to patch it up and think that it's going away. You might be, you're going to be living with this for years and years. I would stop the progress on it until you had a structural engineer. Hate to sound like an alarmist, but that's an important one there you really want to take care of. These are some of the recorded calls we got off the Today's Homeowner Hotline. You're welcome to pick up the phone anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and call 800-946-4420 and let us have your question. We'll tackle as many of those as we possibly can. You sure hate to hear that kind of thing, Joe. I mean,
exactly, yeah.
Mistakes can be made and things, but boy, when you're pouring a slab, any slab anywhere, number one, you've got to have compacted soil. You got to have a type of soil that will compress and will really tighten up well. I had one concrete guy said, well, where's your motorized tamp? How are you going to tamp it? Oh, no, we're just going to walk it off. Walk it off.
With a herd of elephants?
Yeah, and so he says, by the time we walk all over it and we do all of that, it compacts it. And I said, well, I guess we're about to part ways, my friend, because you have to have compaction with a plate compactor to make sure. Again, you got to have the kind of soil that will pack. You have to do that. And before you pour that slab, you need to check it. You need to make sure it's square, make sure it's level, make sure it's not going to blow out or bow, because those are things that you just can't correct no matter what you try to do.
Right. If you don't fix it now, when are you going to fix it? After the wall is built and the house is done and now there's an issue, and well, now what do? You start tearing off the walls of the house? So It has to be fixed now, it has to be addressed. And people think you don't need to use a plate compactor in a situation like that. Well, I'll tell you what, if you're not sure, rent the plate compactor and run it across there. You'll see 6 inches of soil become 2 inches very quickly.
That's right.
And that's the issue. When I worked as a union carpenter, we did a lot of concrete work, and I spent many hours following around this plate compactor, and they are amazingly efficient. They're hard to wrestle with sometimes, especially if you hit a wet spot, but because you can drive it right into the ground and bury it like quicksand. Yeah. But they're super effective and well worth the rental fee if you're doing a project yourself.
Time for our Around the Yard segment, brought to you by our friends at Pavestone. As the weather cools down, our attention begins to turn away from growing lawns towards dealing with all of the leaves we're going to have to deal with. Now, here's several tips. Now, these are really proven great tips to simplify that dreaded chore. So, for starters, don't break your back scooping up a handful of leaves at a time. Instead, rake the leaves onto a small tarp so that you can move a big pile of leaves all at one time. And if you need to bag your leaves, then use a smaller piece of tarp with 3-foot dowels taped to each end of it to make this large scoop that you can rake the leaves on and then funnel it right into a bag. Also, speaking of bags, nobody wants to wrestle with them trying to get it to stay in the can. The reason that a lot of times it will end up pulling away from the top of the can, or you can start by drilling some 1/2-inch holes in the bottom and sides of the can. Now, this will prevent a vacuum from forming as the bag fills with leaves and forcing the air between it and the can. You'll be amazed at how much that can save you a lot of that headache. And another idea to make it easy is take an old bicycle inner tube. It's like a giant rubber band to secure your leaf bag around the top of the garbage can to keep it in place. Some great tips on this Around the Yard segment brought to you by Pavestone. Go to todayshomeowner.com/ask and send us your question, comment, just like Eddie from Georgia did here. Hey, I'd like to stain the concrete countertop on my outdoor kitchen, but I'm not sure how to do this. Could you please share any tips or techniques? Thank you, Joe. Concrete countertops, they came on and were so popular, and they kind of faded away a little bit, and now they're back.
Yep.
Our friends at Quikrete actually have that formula that we've used many times, bags made specifically for creating concrete countertops.
Yep, that's right.
It's fairly easy. Matter of fact, if you want to see video on it, go to todayshomeowner.com, put in concrete countertops, and you'll see how me and my daughter Chelsea created one. But when you're talking about staining it, I guess the first question, is there a sealer already on it?
Right, exactly. Now, does Eddie mention, he doesn't mention how old this is. Either way, you have to start with by cleaning it really well, and they do make concrete cleaners. If you go to Home Depot and go online, you'll find concrete cleaners specifically made for masonry surfaces. So you have to scrub it really clean. If there is a sealer already on it, it may prevent the stain from penetrating, but that's a simple way to find that out, is just to put some stain on it in an inconspicuous spot and try it. But what you want to use is obviously a masonry stain. They do make stains specifically for concrete. Behr has a really good one that's sold at Home Depot. There's another company called Colorcrete, kind of like concrete, but it's Colorcrete, and I think that's available at Home Depot as well. But just follow the directions. You just apply it just like any other stain. The good thing is concrete is really super porous, more porous than wood, so it'll soak it up. And apply it, wipe off any excess. If it's not dark enough, you can do it again, follow the directions. And then you'd want to come back with a sealer. If there's already a sealer on there, I think you'd still be able to stain it, especially if it's an old sealer because it's probably worn out. So I think a good cleaning and then the stain is all Eddie would need to do here.
And you might keep your eye out also for some translucent stain. That's kind of a fun finish on it that's a little bit different.
What's that? I'm not sure I know that.
Yeah, it's a translucent stain that actually almost gives kind of I almost want to say a marbleized type of look, that it absorbs differently in different colors, got some good depth to it. We've used it on a number of patios. Pretty unique kind of a look to it. So that might be an option on that countertop.
Yeah, we should mention, Danny, if you want to stain a concrete counter, the time to do it is when they're making the countertop. I mean, some people don't know the color or they want to change the color, but if you know of a particular color you want your concrete counters to be, tell the manufacturer, the fabricator can stain the entire slab while they're mixing it, and that's absolutely the best way to do it.
Right, and that's what we did on one of the ones on my outdoor kitchen. We're actually able to mix a pigment right in there. You have to measure it just right, but it worked really, really well. Here's another email. Anthony in Mississippi. I painted my garage floor with gray paint and then sprinkled on some black flakes. Now my wife wants to repaint it, but the flakes are already down. Do I have to remove the flakes first, or can can you paint right over them? Well, you're going to have you put the flakes down for a little bit of texture, I assume, so that it's not, slip, and probably sounds pretty good when you have that gray and you sprinkle the black flakes on it. As long as it's not cornflakes. If it's cornflakes, it may not last as long. But so I assume there's probably some type of kit here. But you're going to have that texture, and yes, you can paint right over them, and it'll, color, have the consistent color on it, and you'll still have a little bit of texture on it. I don't think that would be a bad idea, so that you have more consistency. If it's the black flakes that she doesn't like, that would make it consistent color, but you still have a little of a bit of an anti-skid property to it. So that's probably what I would suggest on that. What do you think on that one, Joe?
Yeah, after they put on the flakes, they typically put a clear top coat over the entire surface to protect everything. So he may need to rough that up a little bit, even with, earlier you were talking about a pad sander, just run just even like 80 grit very lightly, go over the whole surface just to give it a little what they call tooth, meaning that the top coat will bite into it. So roughen it up a little bit, clean off the dust, and then apply porch and floor paint. I mean, we never really recommend painting concrete because it'll wear off, but that's what Anthony needs to do. Then just pick the right paint.
Here's another one, Rick in Missouri. I've installed a bulletin board for someone in our office. It's a cork board with a metal trim around the outside. Fairly heavy because it is 4 foot by 3 foot. The problem is the board is sagging inside the trim. What adhesive should I use that will adhere to the metal and the cork board? Boy, I know exactly
what he's talking about.
A lot of times, because you have a tendency to, want to put just one fastener in the wall to hang it, and that pressure is just, you really need to hang it with 2 points on the back of the bulletin board, and then use a wire or 2 separate fasteners on it. But you'll need to take that down, Rick, and you'll need to be able to. What do you think in terms of the glue? Might as well just put some 2-part epoxy on it, and then put it back upside down, face down on the table, and really work that epoxy around the perimeter on the back side of it to hold it in place. Let it dry overnight, and then rehang it the proper way. Any other suggestions?
Well, the other thing you could do is first, if you're going to put 2 screws and a wire in the back, put the screws not on the horizontal top part, but on the vertical side of the frame. This way it's not pulling on the top. And also you can put a vertical strap in the middle from the top to the bottom and attach it like a thin metal strip or even a plastic strip, and that'll keep the frame from separating.
Sure. One of the things I've always enjoyed throughout my whole career as a contractor, as well as the opportunity I have on TV and radio, are the little simple tips, the little things that you go, aha, yes, I wish I had known that years ago. And that's what happens so often when Joe shares with us a simple solution. What about this week, Joe?
All right, Danny, here's how to neatly paint a window without using masking tape. Because as we mentioned a couple of times on air, is if you're going to mask off a window, sometimes it takes longer, especially if it's a true divided light window. You have to mask off every single little pane. It takes longer to mask it off than it does to actually paint it. So here's how you can do it without masking off the glass. Get a proper sash brush, and a sash brush are the type that the bristles are cut at an angle, and usually 1.5 inches wide brush is plenty wide enough. But anyway, take a really good sash brush and apply the paint to around the window and to the grills if they're true divided light, and allow a little bit of the paint. Don't worry, allow a little of the paint to get onto the glass. I'm talking about like 1/8 of an inch, maybe 1/4 inch onto the glass. So just paint it without too much regard to getting it on the glass. And once the paint dries, then you can come back with a razor scraper, and that's the kind that you slide out and has the blade that's about 2 inches wide, not a utility knife with a pointed one, but a straight razor scraper, and get a 6 or 8 inch wide drywall knife. What you want to do is hold the drywall knife against the frame of the window or the grill, protecting the wooden part, and then you just scrape. With the scraper, you scrape the paint toward the knife, toward the blade of the knife. And what that does is it removes the paint, but with the knife, you don't wind up damaging the wood. And what it also does, it leaves a little tiny bit of paint on the glass that you hardly will even see. It'll only be the thickness of the knife blade, but it leaves that, and that air seal created around the glass and the wood will prevent air from coming in, especially if it's an older window. So there you go. How to paint a window without using any masking tape.
Now it's time for our podcast question of the week. You can send one anytime by going to todayshomeowner.com/podcast. This is from Chris in Virginia. And they ask, I have 15 recessed lights throughout my home. I know there's a lot of energy loss through these lights. What is the best insulation method to seal the lights and prevent energy loss through these recessed lights? Well, I'll tell you, I know a lot about this because I had about 30 in my previous house, and that just bugged me. It always bugged me that energy was going up through there. I changed to LED lights, which certainly helped a lot to reduce the amount of heat. And then I actually went in the attic, pulled the insulation back, and I used caulk all around where the recessed can penetrated up through the drywall. So I sealed that part of it off. But here's where you have to be careful because, Joe, now almost all of them, of course, now everything's LED, so you don't have that heat loss. But for years, the builders would put uninsulated cans in that were not rated, which means you should not cover those and have insulation touching those.
Right.
So if you potentially have these uninsulated type recessed housings in your attic, then you really can't cover them up completely. But here's what I did. I took some hardware cloth and actually created these little simple baskets that were about 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. Just made them, I didn't do that in the attic. I just made them all up downstairs, which still took a long time because, like I said, I had at least 30 lights. But I made these little things. Then I brought them up into, my wife thought I was going crabbing, I believe. She thought they looked like crab
Well, if you have crabs in your attic, that would be would be a problem.
That's another solution for you there. But I took those up in the attic, and I pulled my insulation back, and I set it right down on top of the back of the drywall. So I basically encased it. Then I covered it with insulation. So it still had some breathing room in there, but it created a pocket to where the air from downstairs would not be able to penetrate up except just into that one little cavity. And I can't say I noticed a big difference because those type of subtle changes, you won't notice an immediate change.
Right.
But I know that I did the right thing by controlling that airflow going up through there. And anyway, that worked pretty well. I've also heard people taking like regular vent pipe that's like 8 or 10 inch vent pipe and cutting it at 12 or 16 inches and just lowering that down on it and then capping the top.
Creating a chimney.
Yeah, like a little chimney thing and then capping the top of that. That seemed to work pretty well.
Yeah. Well, if you go up into your attic and you see the top of the light fixture round top, those are the ones the insulation has to be away. If you see a big square box, that's what you want to see, a metal box. Those are called IC rated for insulation contact. Those boxes, the light fixture itself is UL rated and it's insulated, so you can put insulation right over the top of it. That's about as good as you're going to get. But in this case, regardless of what Chris has in these 15 lights, he could buy LED retrofit kits now, which it's an LED disc light. Mm-hmm. We often say LED bulb, but LEDs aren't bulbs, they're light emitting diodes. But in any case, it's an LED disc, has wires on it, and on the end of the wires is a socket, just like you'd see on the end of a light bulb. What you do is you take out the bulb that's there, the old bulb, the incandescent or whatever it is, and you screw this in, and you don't have to change the light fixture at all. You're just changing what you see from below, the trim kit. And that would be, if you can get one to fit these, that would be the way. They're pretty affordable. They're probably $6 or $8 a piece. So that would be the quickest way, rather than replacing the whole fixture. That's what I would recommend.
Because if you have a lot of recessed lights, it's just like, prior to me going with LEDs on these lights I had, they just seem to burn out all the time. And then, you try to buy the same bulb, but inevitably you're going to buy one that has a different color temperature to it. You're putting that in, you're sitting there looking, well, that thing looks like it's dull looking, and this one's bright. And after a while, it's very frustrating. So take it a room at a time. That's one way to tackle it. Like Joe mentioned, buy the different adaptable LEDs, get the 4 or 6 you need for that particular room, and do that one room, and then pull those bulbs and save those bulbs for use somewhere. You'll be able to use them somewhere, and then you can do just one room at a time, and then you can get the consistency throughout. The good thing about those LEDs, you're not going to have to replace them probably ever again. They certainly have been successful with the longevity that they have. So great way to go on that, and we appreciate that question from you, Chris, because just like so many times when we have a question like this, there's thousands of people that are out there with the same situation. situation, and we hope we've been able to help Chris and also help all of you that are having that same kind of situation. So feel free to write us a question anytime. Send us one right now at todayshomeowner.com/podcast. Well, that'll pretty much wrap things up for us. And again, we always appreciate those great reviews we've been getting. It's really special that you take the time to send us one of those 5-star reviews. It makes a big difference. We're able to continue growing and growing. I'm Danny Lifford, along with my buddy Joe Truini. Thanks so much for listening to this Today's Homeowner Podcast.